The rain had started just before sunset, the kind that turned city lights into blurred halos and made the sidewalks shine like broken glass. Aisha stood outside the small corner grocery store, her thin shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders, her baby pressed against her chest. The baby hadn't stopped crying for almost an hour. She could feel the tiny body trembling through the worn blanket. 6 months old, too young to understand hunger, too young to understand why his mother's milk had dried up from stress and skipped meals. "Just a little longer," she whispered, rocking him gently. "Mama will fix this." But she didn't know how. Inside the store, warm light spilled onto the wet pavement. People moved in and out with plastic bags filled with bread, snacks, and soda. She watched each person carefully, her heart pounding harder every time someone glanced at her and then quickly looked away. She had never begged before. Not when her husband died in an accident 8 months ago. Not when the landlord banged on her door asking for rent. Not when she sold her wedding bangles to buy diapers. Pride had been the only thing she still owned. But tonight pride wasn't enough. The baby's cries grew weaker, turning into small, exhausted whimpers that frightened her more than loud sobs. She stepped toward the entrance. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and spices filled the air. The fluorescent lights felt too bright. She kept her eyes lowered as she walked to the dairy section. She stared at the small tin of infant formula. It felt like gold. She picked it up and looked at the price. Her hands began to shake. She opened her purse anyway. 3 coins, not even enough for half. For a moment, a dangerous thought crossed her mind. Just slip it into the bag, just walk out. The baby needs it. But her fingers refused to move. Instead, she walked to the counter, clutching the tin like it was her last hope. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced at her. "Yes." Her throat closed. Words felt heavier than mountains. "Please," she whispered. He leaned closer. "What?" Tears burned her eyes. "I just need milk for my baby." Her voice cracked. The store grew quiet in her ears, even though people were still moving around. "I don't have enough money. I can clean here. I can work. I just need milk." For a second, the shopkeeper didn't react. His face hardened slightly, as if he had heard too many stories, too many excuses. "We can't give things for free," he said quietly. "If I do it for one person." The baby began to cry again, weak and hoarse. Aisha felt something inside her break. She lowered her head. "I'm not asking for free," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, I just need milk for my baby." At the back of the store, near the shelves of rice and lentils, a man froze. He had been holding a carton of eggs, staring at nothing in particular, when her words reached him. "Please, I just need milk for my baby." Something in her voice was different. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't drama. It was desperation. The man's name was Farhan. He was in his early 30s, dressed in a simple shirt and jeans. To most people, he looked like any other customer. They couldn't see the memory that hit him like a wave at that moment. His mother. He remembered being 7 years old, standing beside her in a pharmacy. She had counted coins with trembling fingers, trying to buy his medicine for a chest infection. He remembered the pharmacist's impatient sigh. He remembered pretending not to notice the shame in her eyes. He remembered the night she cried quietly, thinking he was asleep. Farhan's grip tightened around the egg carton. He turned slowly toward the counter. Aisha was standing there, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. The baby's tiny hand had slipped out of the blanket, fingers curling in the air. The shopkeeper looked uncomfortable now, glancing at other customers as if hopping someone else would intervene. Farhan felt his throat tighten. Before he could stop himself, he walked forward. "How much is it?" he asked, his voice unsteady. The shopkeeper looked at him. 800. Farhan didn't hesitate. He pulled out his wallet and placed the money on the counter. And add diapers, he said. Aisha looked up, startled. No, she whispered quickly. No, I can't. He shook his head, unable to speak for a moment. Please, he said softly, let me. She stared at him, confusion and disbelief mixing in her tear-filled eyes. You don't even know me, she said. Farhan swallowed hard. I know, he replied, but I know what it feels like. The shopkeeper bagged the milk and a small pack of diapers. The sound of plastic rustling felt strangely loud. When the bag was handed to her, Aisha's hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it. Thank you, she whispered. Farhan nodded, but his vision had blurred. He quickly turned away, pretending to check his phone. But the tears came anyway. They slid down his face before he could stop them. He wasn't crying because of pity. He was crying because, for the first time in years, he felt like he had finally done something his younger self had prayed for someone else to do. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. Aisha stood under the small awning, staring at the bag in her hands like it might disappear if she blinked. May God bless you, she said, her voice steady now. Farhan stepped out of the store a few seconds later. He wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. It's nothing, he said. It's not nothing, she replied. Tonight it's everything. The baby had stopped crying. He was quiet now, his tiny face pressed against his mother's shoulder. Farhan felt his chest tighten again. What's his name? He asked. Ahmed, she said softly. Farhan smiled faintly. He's strong. He has to be, she replied. For a moment, they stood there in silence, two strangers connected by something invisible yet powerful. Farhan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. I work at a delivery company, he said. We sometimes need part-time packers. It's not much, but if you're looking for work. Aisha stared at the card. You would help me find a job, she asked, almost afraid to believe it. He nodded. Everyone deserves a chance. Her lips trembled again, but this time the tears were different. They weren't filled with helplessness. They were filled with hope. I won't forget this, she said. Farhan gave a small smile. Just help someone else one day, that's enough. As he walked away, the city lights no longer looked cold. They looked softer, warmer. Inside the store, life went on. Customers came and left. The shopkeeper returned to his routine. But outside, something extraordinary had happened. A mother had found relief. A baby would sleep with a full stomach. And a man who once stood helpless beside his own struggling mother had finally healed a piece of his past. Sometimes, miracles don't look like bright lights or loud celebrations. Sometimes, they look like a simple tin of milk placed gently on a counter. Sometimes they sound like a stranger whispering, "Please, I just need milk for my baby." And sometimes, they begin with one person choosing not to look away.